Okay. Actually, my answer to that question is always your whatever description is that you are applying for, whether it's graduate school or a job, right? You need to let that job description or that career opportunity dictate what your structure needs to be. So you need to have different versions of these documents. So, for example, when I graduated with my PhD and I was doing a national job search, right, to become a professor, some schools were research intensive, some schools were teaching intensive, some schools had a blend of that. So I had different versions of my career documents based on where I was going to be sending that. Because obviously, whatever that company or that graduate school's priority is, that needs to be first, right? Or pretty close to the top of the resume. So if they mention education first, you need to have that section on your resume first. If they mention job experience, you need to have that section be first. So usually they'll give you a list of qualifications for a job, or even for a graduate school, they'll give you their list of things that they prefer to see with students, right? And I would organize your career documents exactly like that. And then just call it something, right, like, research first or emphasis on, whatever that might be. So then that way you have these different versions ready to go. Because absolutely cater whatever it is to those specific documents. I would never be sending out the same career materials twice. In fact, and I would always, oh, oh, sorry. I hit this, right? Okay. There we go. Perfect. Okay. Perfect. Okay. Sorry about that for the recording people. Now, now you can actually see my screen. The other question I get asked a lot is, do you need a letter of application or a cover letter? Yes, absolutely you do. I would never send any resume out that did not have the letter of application or the cover letter with it. I consider those to be two halves of a whole, and together they make up your job application or your graduate school application. So as a matter of fact, right, because they give different pieces of information, the letter of application is where you can actually then in sentence form, right, really tell them what your highlights are. That's where you really get to give them a little bit more of a narrative. Because most resumes you're writing in bullet form, right? Or you're doing phrases, right, and action verbs, and there's not as much room there to then actually do the sentences that are going to be in the cover letter. So I would absolutely then do these two things together. And I would, here you see right in the third bullet point, use the words from the career description so that way if you were uploading this electronically to somewhere, and a company then could just do a keyword search, and then your resume and your cover letter would pop up based on what they were looking for in the company. So I would always make sure you have a searchable, scannable document so that, again, if you're uploading these things electronically, then it's easy to find the people with the criteria, I guess, right, of the background that they're looking for. If you've got links to anything that helps you, right, show off who you are, if you have a personal website, an electronic portfolio, a LinkedIn profile, anything along those lines, include that link somewhere in either your resume or your cover letter. Anything that, again, continues to help you actually demonstrate who you are, and then that way you tend to jump up off the page a little bit more than if you were just documents. And you better be proofreading. Now that I've worked here, right, for 3 years, and I look at a lot of the applications for the Writing Center, I see a lot of really terrible resumes and cover letters. Some that have, like, grammar mistakes, right, or writing mistakes. And since I'm the Writing Center director, then that's right, not a good way to do that. But also, it's easy to have mistakes in the resume as well. For some reason, I think if the smaller the phrases, then the less the students tend to proofread those things. And so there's a lot of mistakes then that can creep in there as well. I would say even make your own letterhead. If, right, for the resume and for the cover letter, if you're using like a Microsoft Office program, they have tons of free templates that you can download from the Microsoft Office website. Find one that you like, download it, and then actually then that does a lot of the formatting and style for you. I would encourage you to find sort of your competition, see if you can find other students, right? So on like monster.com, that's not even probably a career website anymore, is it? But find one of those electronic databases for job materials, and I would find the people that you potentially be competing against and look at what they're doing with their career documents, right? So see how they've structured them, see what style and formatting they're doing, what they have for their headings, how they've broken up the information, and borrow what you like in terms of like style, formatting, document design. Because the thing about these documents is not only are they looking at the content, but they're also going to be looking at how well you graphically design these particular documents, especially the resume. Because I always look at those kinds of things like use of white space, whether you're doing bullet points or some other kind of structure, how your headings look, if you're doing subheadings, if you've used italics or bold in a particular effective way. I look for all of those things. In fact, because then it's really easy, a lot of students will have an accidental like extra space at the beginning of a bulleted point, and that then looks like a mistake, and I can see that at 20 paces. And then that to me then tells me that the student wasn't very careful, right, in how they put that together. Because unfortunately, the letter of application and the resume, their purpose is to get you the interview, right, whether it's graduate school or a job. Because then in the interview, then you get to really shine with your personality, but you won't get the interview if there's something in those documents that puts you immediately into the no pile. And I've had to hire, many, many years now in different capacities. And my father was in hospital administration for 40 years before he retired. They are looking for the tiniest of reasons to put you in the no column, because then that makes their job easier. They just want the small pile, of ones that they want to interview. And whatever, it takes, they're going to be like, oh, that's a mistake, or that I don't like the spacing on that, or graphic design, this looks terrible, or there's the resume is all sentences. I have actually seen a ton of those. So whatever it is, they're going to try to put them in the no column. So then that way, then they have just a small group to go through and look at, because they're busy people, right? So they want to make sure they're using their time effectively as well. I would always say in the letter of application, where did you see this job or the graduate school, right? Always say that, because then they like to find out if they're advertising, which methods of advertising are working for them. You need, contact information that is very, very easily accessible, right? I would avoid anything that is a negative. So if you don't have this kind of an experience, don't highlight that. Focus on what you do have, right? So if you're not an obvious fit for the graduate school or for the job, tell me how you see yourself as a fit, right? And so they know what's going to be like a tired phrase or a cliche, right? We tend to hear those a lot. So anything that tends to come up over and over again, try to avoid anything like that. Try to have it as original as possible. Yes, exactly right. And that's not specific at all, right? In fact, I think, where is it? Aha. Give examples. Show me rather than tell me. That is exactly right, Mr. Burgess. I have students all the time that tell me that they're amazing at they're detail-oriented, good at time management, and something else, right? Those are the three I get all the time. But all they're doing is telling me that. They're not showing me that. So anything you want to highlight, particularly in that cover letter, give me an example. Connect those adjectives, that you're using to describe yourself, and connect them to something that you've done, right? Have you had administrative experience that required you to be detail-oriented? Right? Have you never been late, in over 2 years in this particular position? Something, again, that shows those people what you're trying to tell them. Because I guarantee you, every student I've ever talked to, everybody thinks they are detail-oriented, a hard worker, or a good worker, great at time management, on time, for everything. Everybody always says exactly the same things. And you're not going to stand out unless you can actually connect that to a project or previous job experience or school experience. If you think you're great at time management because you're balancing 2 jobs, a family, and 15 hours of school, say that, Tell them who you are and that you're still able to maintain, a really good GPA or something like that. Anything that'll help them figure out who you are and do a better job of connecting those things. I always get these questions. I would never put a GPA unless it is better than 3.5. Unless you have to. Like if the job tells you you have to reveal what that GPA is, then you have to put it. But most of the time, if it's not a 3.5 or higher, it's not going to help you, so don't put it on there. If you don't have a lot of job experience, put the coursework that may be helping you. So let's say you want to go into ministry, but you haven't, this will be your first actual job, right, on a church staff. So if you don't have any job experience, give me your list of courses, right, that actually applies to ministry. So, I mean, if you're in church and family ministry, like give us the course names. So then that way you actually have a section of your resume that says coursework, right, appropriate coursework, applicable coursework, something like that. And again, anything that is languages, computer use, social media, anything like that that's going to help you, make sure that you are listing all of these things. And always be updating these documents. You think that you'll be able to remember, right, everything that you've done if you're only updating like once a year. I guarantee you will forget something that's really important. So every time something really good happens to you or you get something else that you want to put as a bullet point or want to add to those documents, add it right then so that way you're constantly updating these documents and they're always the best, freshest version of where you are at this exact moment. Yep, and then there you see, right, find your competition, right, look at some examples, look at those documents, see how they've done that if that's helpful to you. Okay, and here's where I actually differ a little bit from some people. I think you should go ahead and put the references on your resume. Because, right, everybody puts references available upon request. Obviously, you wouldn't even be applying for jobs if you didn't have anybody that could actually, like, say something good about you. So I encourage you, get rid of that. They know references are available upon request. Go ahead and have a document, either the last page of your resume or a separate page, right, that's just your references, but go ahead and have that. Have those people ready to go, have their contact information. Just make sure if it's a separate document that you've actually formatted all of these documents in the same way. They should all look like they go together so that if I printed them out and like stapled them, they would all be in the same font, in the same style, with the same formatting, and choices. But I would go ahead and have them. You need at least 3, probably no more than 5. And they should not be all family members. I had one student that actually just gave me 3 family members one time. Nope, that doesn't work. Your family is supposed to love you, right? So we actually need then a mix. So if you have somebody who's ministry, if you have somebody who's professional, so it'd be nice to then have a variety because then they can speak to different aspects of your personality, different aspects of your work ethic or your background. Okay, I would make strategic choices for your resume, right, about those headings and those sections. So pretty standard ones, right, are education. Sometimes you can even have a summary section up at the very, very top that kind of just gives a brief overview of the information you want to highlight. But education, previous job experience, coursework, volunteer, anything like that, special skills or qualifications. Those tend to be the best. If you have a gap in job or career or something like that, consider putting relevant job experience or relevant experience, and then that way you're going ahead and telling them that I'm just highlighting my experience. I'm not giving you every single thing in chronological order. And again, right, list coursework or international studies to make up for a lack of work experience. And again, there it is, right? Let that description guide your choices about content. If they emphasize education, put that first. If they emphasize experience, put that first. If they have specific requirements about the type of work or the number of years of experience, then you need to make sure that your documents reflect that. I used to have, when I would practice this with, I taught this as a class in my previous institution, and I would get students applying for jobs, right, that required 10 years of experience. I was like, what are you doing? Like, there's no way, you're 18 years old. Like, there's no way that this works. So then the important thing is also, right, make sure that you can actually meet these basic requirements. And again, I also recommend don't have an objective, right? That objective statement that tends to be in a lot of the resume formats. Because either number one, they're so broad that they don't help you, right? I actually did see several students write objective to get a job. Of course, you want to get a job, right? That's the whole point in you sending out these documents in the first place. So then it usually, right, it doesn't help you. Or I've seen students that had such specific objective statements that they had to change it every single time they had a job, right? They were sending it out. And then more often than not, my students would forget to make those changes. And then they send out a resume, right, that has the wrong objective statement for the wrong career opportunity. So I would just get rid of it. I don't even think you guys need that anymore. I would do, right, work with templates, effectively use white space and fonts, and be consistent. However you decide to do this, right, job titles, job dates, make sure that that's the way that you do that throughout all of these documents. It's really easy in these kinds of documents to change, like to start abbreviating the months, right, as opposed to writing them out. So whatever stylistic choices you make, that needs to be consistent throughout the whole document. Or if you write JAN period, right, for January, but then you forget to put the period at the end of the abbreviation sometimes, then again, that'll look like a mistake. So however you want to do that, just make sure you are consistent. Okay, and then the last thing then I was going to chat with you about is make sure you are working on the appropriate word choice. Right, so if resumes are looking at, right, action verbs that tend to start those bullet points, then there's a lot of words, particularly that your thesaurus would tell you are very similar in meaning, but they have different sort of feelings to them, right? So, for example, what's the difference between administered and coordinated? Mr. Burgess, do you have an answer?
Well, I would think that administrate means that you are in charge of it, but that you have delegated it to others, and you just make sure that it gets done, but you're not actively involved in it. But coordinating, you are actively in it.
I think that's absolutely right. So administered then means, right, I'm probably higher up on the totem pole, right? So it was potentially my idea, but then I, then implemented other people below me or something like that to actually do sort of the hands-on aspect. Whereas absolutely coordinated does, maybe then I'm actually at the same level maybe as some of my coworkers, but I was just chosen then to actually be the hands-on part of it or to be the team leader in that particular group, but I'm not sort of the higher up or the boss. Absolutely. And right, and so the same thing for these other groups of words, right? So just make sure that you're being very careful about the word choice, right? So arranged versus assembled, I would say one is more of an administrative kind of thing, right? If I'm arranging it, then I'm possibly responsible for travel arrangements or things that I can do almost from like an executive administrator or executive secretary or something like that point of view. Versus assembled, again, makes it sound like it's more of a hands-on kind of process, right? Supervised versus advised, right? Again, one of those is more of like a mentor relationship, and one of those is potentially less of an intimate kind of a relationship. And right, evaluated versus examined. One of those, again, tends to look more about people, and I would say examined tends to be more of things that you would do with objects or a process that you wanted to examine. And then again, right, initiated versus created. Initiated makes it sound like that it was not my idea, but that I was given the task of implementing it, versus created, right, that then sounds like it was my idea originally, right, and then I was the one that was able to move that forward. So again, right, just be very careful, because every time my students, right, highlight these things and then look in the thesaurus, right, they get a whole bunch of words that sort of fit, but then you want to make sure absolutely, number one, that you're being truthful, right, about your experience. But number two, that again, you're being specific and giving them the best representation of who you are and what you do. I would encourage you, never use the same action verb twice in a resume, if you could help it. Because again, the idea here then is to give them a representation of who you are and what your experience or what your job stuff is, right, your school. So again, if you can, try to vary those action verbs so that then you're not doing the same ones over and over and over again. Okay, and that was kind of all I had, unless you have other questions about how to do these things.